We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Thomas Jefferson. Welcome back, history buffs, ghost story lovers, paranormal enthusiasts, and mystery seekers. Today, we are diving into the turbulent times leading up to the American Revolution in the 13 colonies of young America. Get ready to uncover intriguing facts and stories about the rich, the famous, and the common person caught in the midst of this historic upheaval. From the early days of 1760, whispers of unrest began to spread like wildfire through the cobblestone streets. Through papers, pamphlets, and fervent discussions, the people of the colonies sensed that change was on the horizon. Join me as we explore the lead-up to the birth of a new nation, where the first words penned ignited a flame of revolution that would sweep through the hearts of both Americans and the British. From the corridors of power to the ordinary lives of the everyday person, the emotions run high as the quest for freedom unites a nation in turmoil. Follow along as we unravel the events that shaped a nation and see how the rumblings of discontent paved the way for a revolution that would change the course of history. So join us for a thrilling ride through the times and troubles of the American Revolution. Stay tuned as we uncover the mysteries, the intrigues, and the passion that fueled a revolution unlike any other. Join the chat and add your input as we explore the drama, the suspense, and the ultimate triumph of a nation's quest for liberty. Don't miss out on this riveting tale of courage, sacrifice, and the unbreakable spirit that defined a generation. Let's dive in and discover the untold stories of the American Revolution. Get ready to witness the birth of a new nation and the stirring words that echoed through the ages. Freedom.
It does not take a majority to prevail, but rather an irate, tireless minority, keen on setting brush fires for freedom in the minds of men. Samuel Adams.
Facts are stubborn things, and whatever may be our wishes, our inclinations, or the dictates of our passion, they cannot alter the state of facts and evidence. John Adams.
Liberty, when it begins to take root, is a plant of rapid growth. George Washington.
I long to hear that you have declared an independency, and in the new code of laws which I suppose it will be necessary for you to make, I desire you would remember the ladies, and be more generous and favorable to them than your ancestors. Abigail Adams.
Give me liberty, or give me death. Patrick Henry.
Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. Benjamin Franklin.
Those who expect to reap the blessings of freedom must, like men, undergo the fatigue of supporting it. Thomas Paine.
Well, there you have it, folks. Hello, gatekeepers. How you doing? Welcome in. Welcome in. Thank you very much, Mr. Branson. I enjoy my hat very much. Thank you. Pleased to see you here. Hello, Henry. How you doing? Uncommon Belief. Wonderful to see you. How you doing, Renice? I love you, baby. How are you? How are you? If I miss saying hi to you, please forgive me. Wow. So y'all remember Ricochet Rabbit? Hey, Rose, thanks for the bacon, sweetheart. Right back at you. I've got shortbread and triple strength anti-stress tea. With a little rose, a little mint. So, wow. So to the coincidences, the synchronicities, they're just not lost on us, are they, light workers? I mean, if you're out there, and I hope you are, and I hope Lindsay's out there listening, and Sarah, and so many people, and Edna, and everybody. I know that you'll get this, Brian. Lynn can't be with us tonight. She is on a hard-earned vacation, and she's got a big show to prepare for too. So I said, look, we're going to keep going. That way we get done by the end of summer, because and we got Halloween and, Halloween. So pop in when you can, and no stress. No stress. Sarah's on the bus. I know she is. So that's that. Wish her well. I don't know how the puppy is. Last I heard from her was Thursday, and the puppy was well at that time. Ted, Sovereign Silver, the gel, if you can do it. You can also sprinkle, if you put Neosporin. This is what I do. Little of the claw powder, let's say that. Sprinkle it in, then Neosporin over it. And I always used to tease the kids that I would put Neosporin just to hold the claw powder in. And it'll be gone tomorrow. If you can keep them from getting kicking the, I hate the word scab, but what else are you going to say? Opening it back up again, Hey, Jack, welcome in just in time. So that's that. So Lynn is on the road, or she's coming back from the road or something. So we wish her well. If she wants to pop in here, I told her, please do. Give me your character of the episode that you want to talk about, or the recipe that you found, or whatever it might be that has to do with 13 colonies. That being said, the fact that I decided to do this show at this time, the people who know me, is no way an accident of any kind. I ain't even hiding it. I'm just saying. So, because it's so parallel, I'm going through and I'm reading stories of these people who lived in these times, just like us, 248 years removed. Sounds like a lot. But really? That much? So many things similar, right? So many parallels, so many words that still feel the same and spring the same emotions quickly, draw you in, make people do the wildest things. And nothing has changed over time. With words beget emotion, and depending on who's saying them and what they mean, what they're putting behind them, can shift nations, right? So the parallels in this, again, I did this because, as many times I've said, and don't care if people, and then fine, just listen. The playlist is there. If you come along somebody who doesn't quite get it, or a kid that you know that they're not learning it in school anymore, and you want to sit down with them and talk them through it, this is great. Use it. Liberty 1997 PBS special. We've dropped the links up here. It's free on YouTube. It is free on thearchives.gov, and watch it with them. You can watch this. You can laugh at me along the way. So what's this crazy woman doing? What is she saying? Why is she so passionate about this? Because I am a patriot. Do you understand? There are people in here that are just as patriotic in their heart and their emotions for the same reasons as John Adams, as Samuel Adams. And it was always Samuel. Until the beer came out and everybody started calling him Sam. His friends didn't even call him Sam. The things they do to some of these people and twist the history and change things for whatever's hip and cool. They're hip and cool enough. He doesn't get much cooler. Unless you want to talk about yesterday. Ladies and gentlemen, precious metals. What you witnessed yesterday was a lot of brass, a lot of heroics, a lot of stupidity, a lot of chicanery, a little treason. I urge you don't jump to conclusions. I urge you to give it 24, 72 hours. But what you did see in real time, I know. I saw it. I saw people pointing, people stalling, people not doing their job, people pretending, pantomime, and others who weren't in on the joke, let's say, going, what? Felt very 1963 to me. How about you? Think about the Zapruder film when you see the man on the ground in charge of that service detail tell people that have been trained to ride the bumper on the back of the president's vehicle in that motorcade to get off. And his face just go stark white. All the blood ran out of it. And he went, what do you mean? Get away from him. Quit protecting him. You literally see it. 1963. I saw it yesterday, too. Did you? Did you see something else that didn't make sense? Did you see it in real time? Did you see it where you went, oh, hold up. Wait a minute. Something ain't right. I saw it. I saw the demons. I saw the darkness. I saw the games people play. They've been playing them for hundreds of years. We got them in this series. The parallels are amazing. Absolutely, Ted. Parallels are amazing. And then you get something like tonight. I'm sitting there literally at the time working on this show. And I'm trying to, grab some extra because, Lynn, take the time. It's a lot of work what she's doing. And don't worry about it. I got it. I got this part. I'm pretty good familiar with this part, the beginning. And I just put up the title. And because it's the episodes we're following, tonight we're doing episode 2 of Liberty, the documentary, as you well know. Absolutely uncommon. And I'll get to that just a sec. So I'm putting the title up. And because they have their title, I use it. Last week was Reluctant Revolutionaries. And this one was Blows Will Decide. And because it's Lexington and Concord as well. Sorry, guys. I'm trying to work with some tech issues here, too. It's crazy. Oh, my gosh. When will you all realize I don't stop, I don't give up? My life has given me buku patience. Try me. So anyway, I'm setting up the title. Blows shall decide or something, or must. That was the word. Their title. And because we are going from, of course, the Boston Massacre and the succession of events, and into Paul Revere's Great Ride and Lexington and Concord, the first, actual kinetic, really official. There's been plenty of kinetic. Don't let them lie to you. And I called it the shot heard around the world. Then I heard the shot heard around the world. Cigarette keeps going out. Right after that. I mean, at the same time. Said, what? What do you mean? What? What happened? Oh, hell no. Oh, hell no. Pull up all my stuff. Okay. What's happened? Oh my God. People keep forgetting the people that got hurt behind him. My man got up. I heard the brass from here. I felt it. I felt the message. I'm sure you did too. But I also saw something else, light workers. Demons are easy to see. They stick right out now. You can smell them. The ones that are standing there telling you that thousands of people didn't see somebody crawling across the top of that. There's video. Didn't see people pointing and people going, oh man. Comeuppance. Hey, D-Rock. But I also saw something else. Did you? I saw something different. I saw a crowd that moved, for the most part, towards the trouble. Leaned in. Like first responders. It was reminiscent to me of similar, of course not the same, firefighters running into the buildings on 9/11 to help, or firefighters running into the forest fire to help. These people leaned in. People covered people in the stands, in the bleachers. A father jumped in front of what he, at that moment, knew as sounds coming at him. Retired fire chief, saved his family and took one for them. That's real. That can't be excused. Whoever dropped the ball cannot be excused, for somebody did. But also something else came out of it. One fraction. That much. The world changed. Just like in Lexington and Concord. Just like so many of these guys, these Christopher Siders and the Crispus Attucks, it's hard to say, Atticus from the Boston Massacre, the 5 there, the 56 who signed and knew if they did not hang together, they would hang separately. Hey, Lindsay, I was hoping you'd show up, sweetheart. It's good to see your face. With a little bitty face. But I saw people lean in. Sure, I saw cameras, and sure, I saw faces and heads turning around. And I saw a very strong man jump on his family and take one. A patriot, a hero. And I saw a grandfather hit his knees. I saw a husband hit his knees. I saw an American hit his knees. But by God, I saw a president get up. And I saw good wash through that crowd. And strangers trying to breathe life into strangers. And people shielding others. And people helping. And they all turned and looked towards the darkness and said, I see you. I see all of you. They can't hide anymore. We see them. And by God, I know a patriot when I see one. How about you? We have a few tonight. The parallels are off the chain. The words still mean the same today, in my opinion, as they meant then. I hope you're here to get some hope, pick up some funny and some laughs, maybe see how the people in these 13 colonies, all their warts, all their bad ideas and their confounded, some of them downright hypocritical. I want my freedom. Some of them probably went and complained to their slaves about that. Wonder how the indentured servants, who were of all cultures, and how the enslaved felt about that. Because not too many generations before that, just about 150 years, their own bloodlines fled their countries to get away from that. And then they came and did the same or similar. They eased up on some things. And I think that's one thing that people look back and say, it's like, why did they do this? How could people stand up and talk about freedom with such beautiful words and then go home and they have slaves? Well, it's hard to imagine. These were the times. But they weren't not trying to sort that. If you could hear some of the letters and some of the arguments and some of the things that were going on at the time. But the First Continental Congress, when it was getting together, and it just is, in the first episode that we saw, they were trying to sort that out, but it was more like a triage. I wonder if you're tracking me if I say that, because they have to put out the wildfire. What's the biggest problem? And I think everybody that was just getting together was trying to sort that out. You've got John Adams, who's trying to go about things in a lawful way, his cadence and the way he spoke, and he was just all about freedom and being independent and being together as colonies to be as one. And he was just adamant about this. He just wasn't sure how much to give out, but he was very outspoken about it. In fact, that saved his butt on one thing that happens tonight that they kind of grazed over in the first one, and I wanted to touch on, and that was the Boston Massacre. Because his reputation as being such a patriot for so long and standing for the cause really was the only thing that kept him from being hung in the streets at one point. And some of you know what I'm talking about. Very interesting times. We are also living in very interesting times. And I know a lot of people out there are hurting. But again, us as, and scared, and people go at it and, they fear, and some are angry, and some are stomping their feet and saying they're not going to get away with it again. I've been saying that since, Dallas. When you keep seeing them do the same stuff over and over and over and over, Waco, Oklahoma City, 9/11, Flight 93, for the love of Pete. Anybody go see that hole? There were parts of that hole that didn't even belong to the same plane. They've been wagging this dog a long time. But there's always real people that get hurt in it. We shouldn't let them get away with it again. Certainly not what happened yesterday. Who benefits? Who had the power? Those are always the questions. I know who had it when it started yesterday, but I definitely know who had it when everybody walked away. God won yesterday. Took some good people that made choices to do good things, and I hope they're always held up as heroes, because they were. And it always, always works out that the scum that does it is, you can't get mad because, the mental or the pills or the MK Ultra or the, whatever is going on. Something talking to his skull, maybe. I don't know. Don't know. Can't really say. But it's a pattern usually. So you have to feel sorry for him, because, your Sirhans and you often wonder. Your Oswalds. It's the ones pushing the buttons. The ones doing the mamby-jamby. See what I'm saying? So what do we learn from it this time? There are still real warriors in this earth. And if you find one, you better hang on to them, because they're few and far between. Got to ask yourself, what's the motivation for people to do things like that? Somebody that could just go off, buy an island, and bounce grandchildren on his knee all day long. Only person I know that ever went into office and lost money. Every other politician has gained by millions and billions. He lost about $500 million. The lies, the lies, the lies. And it's the same here in the 1700s. The lack of communication, the amount of time it takes to get the communication across, the letter, an urgent letter asking the king what to do next. Took 6 weeks for the king to get it, and 6 weeks for the king to send it back, the answer. And even if he sent back the answer with a bunch of troops, you had no idea what was coming or what to prepare for. And if you were a town in city called Boston, Mass, where a bunch of upstarts and rabble-rousers lived, as the other colonies thought, it could get crazy. It got a little crazy. So let's see how crazy. Don't get all crazy about yesterday. I'm telling you. Shot heard around the world, baby. It's like Lexington and Concord. Another parallel. Because things like this usually make good people stand up and make a difference in a good way, in a positive way. Because that's what happened to these people. And that's why it's fun to look back and say, what'd they do? How'd they survive? How did these people survive in a town where 1/3 at this point feels the way they feel? 1/3 doesn't really care, kind of likes things the way they are, and they're doing all right. And the other third are dead set against you. They're killing each other. You don't hear about that. They're going in each other's house, taking each other out. They're starting to boycott shops that are Tory, put the big whitewash T on the doors and the windows. This is causing problems. They're doing things like, you're hearing about the tar and feather, remember last time. These are horrible things. They're hurting people. People's skin were coming off in slabs. Why? Because you've got these little groups, okay, even in just the cities. Because listen, in the other 13 colonies, some of them are chill. They're farmers and they have no idea what's going on here. Yeah, they understand the tax, and yeah, they're hearing about the papers, but not as much as in the cities of New England and New York and Philadelphia and around there. More metropolitan, if you want to call it, right? So these pockets, how do you get these pockets of people to be emotional about something enough to want change, but not beat the crap out of each other in the streets and set each other's homes on fires and tar and feather people? And they're thinking crazy things like, if we kidnap the tax collector, we don't have to pay the taxes. Nobody knows what they're doing. They're just reacting to this emotion and this oppression, and it always happens century after century. Oppressed people, pushers get pushed, and it's all this. So some smart scholars, some business owners, some people that have had a chance, like Samuel Adams, who has really been into politics all his life, and propaganda, knows how to push a people towards something like, aren't you sick of paying taxes? Why, yes, I am. Then come with us, and much more complicated things. But this was him all his life. Don't you think that we should be governing ourselves? Why, yes. How can a king know what we need? He's way over there. These things, much more intelligent, of course, but this is the idea. This is the flavor. Okay. And he's doing that. And then you have John Adams writing, his wonderful letters and his wonderful things that are being printed in papers all over throughout the colonies, and making a name for himself, as a wonderful speaker on these things. He doesn't know how to organize a group and not get them to go cross the line and have a peaceful presentation of their wants, their needs, and what, what they're not going to stand for anymore. It's very difficult to do that, especially when you can't just pick up the phone, or you can't just, call out and say, hey, everybody meet. We're going to have a group meeting. If you want to bring a snack, please do. Casserole, maybe, enough for the class. And let's talk about it. You didn't even have that, right? So that's what Samuel Adams started to do. He started to take out ads, pretty much in the classified, like you saw with the Boston Tea Party. That's how they did it and how they got it to be calm. Remember? Everybody's trying to sell that. It was a big rabble-rousing, and they're busting crates and hooping around like wild savages, right? No. In fact, it was the Daughters of Liberty, who was a women's group that was just as affluent at the time in doing these, getting the word out and trying to have tea parties and things like this, and have everybody get together as a group and start more organizing their thoughts and their grievances. It was their idea to dress as Mohawk Indians and put war paint and things and change their hair and put feathers in their hair and stuff, just so it would be difficult for the crowd to point them out in a positive way. Everybody says it was the Sons of Liberty. It wasn't. It was the Daughters of Liberty who came up with that. So I found that interesting. But the point was trying to organize something that would be peaceful, instead of everybody getting tar and feathered and all kinds of nuts, stuff, and hurt. People getting hurt. But I think it's inevitable when you have something like this happening, a birth of a nation. As Thomas Jefferson said, the tree of liberty must be watered with the blood of patriots. And I think that that's almost a signal of that cycle, and a people, a century of people, where are we going? Okay, we went too far. Pull it back, pull it back, pull it back. We got too far away from the Waltons, folks, and so many other things that moral compass, right? Got a little rickety, and it seems like the universe doesn't like that too much, and something really bombastic happens and everything chills for a little bit. Well, this was their bombastic. So, without further ado, part 2, episode 2 of Liberty. No, Echo, everybody knew, sweetheart. It was pretty, kind of like us right now. Exactly like that feeling. In another parallel. Everybody knew. Yeah, that's about to change. This part's so groovy, isn't it? It's groovy. Beautiful pictures, man.
The day the tax must be paid, a group of men dressed up as Mohawk Indians dumped 340 chests of tea into Boston Harbor.
The Tea Party was a very limited act of violence. In fact, they do nothing but dump tea. A padlock is broken, it's replaced. We think of this as a lot of yahooing and yelping and noise. It was just sort of ploop, ploop, ploop.
Very important.
They were very, very careful to keep this from getting out of hand.
We're all throwing the tea overboard.
we catch someone in our party trying to stuff some of the tea into his pockets. He is stripped of his booty and his clothes, and we send him home naked, in disgrace. Then we went home, in an orderly fashion. Boston enjoys the most peaceful night it has had in many a month.
Went home in a peaceful fashion. A lull came over. Something went over that crowd at the Boston Tea Party. There wasn't anything like you see in Sons of Liberty, which I will bring up later, that took history and just flipped it, where Samuel Adams is standing on the bridge of the boat, just daring the captain of the British squad that has the whole ship under, complete control at the end of a barrel, and just daring him to shoot. And the governor comes up and puts his hands on the barrel and pushes it down, says, "Don't do it because you'll make Samuel Adams a martyr." Never happened. Absolutely never happened. Talk about your propaganda. For what reason? I don't know. Literary license, just having fun with it. Who cares? Point is, it's not true. This was very calm. And I think that has profound importance to this time, because that calm came over that crowd and everybody just turned and went home. That one guy, they said a small little group had their fun. This guy went home naked and in shame. But see, this is the thing. Parallel. At times like these, when you have obvious dark and light, not everybody on either side was either one. There was a mixture on both sides. I promise you that. Always is. You always have these moments of that crowd feeling something different just happened. You felt it yesterday.
There was a lot of anger in London about the dumping of the tea. What this is a public display of defiance. And that kind of element of defiance, more than the constitutional formulations, is more important. This is gesture politics on the big scale, and it's very successful. We still, to this day, remember the Boston Tea Party. It's one of the most successful examples of gesture politics, and it was a gesture that the British government understood.
January 29th, 1774. The King's Privy Council, a hearing to consider the Massachusetts petition for the removal of Thomas Hutchinson as governor. The room is packed with London society, and all eyes are on Benjamin Franklin, the center of a storm of controversy. He has admitted that it was he who had leaked Hutchinson's letters to the Boston Radicals. This is going to be a great show.
That's
clear
important.
Their guns, ready for firing. The greatest fear of the colonists, British tyranny, seems to have come true. The port of Boston is closed. Massachusetts is put under military rule. Its government enforced at the point of a gun.
That must have been something to see, all those ships coming at you like that. That's scary.
I
Scary
woke last
time.
night shaking from a frightful dream. We have come to the edge of the ocean, and there is no advancing or retreating. My own sons may sink in the torrent. I pray that there be some decent, honorable way to put an end to this conflict. To be once again reconciled with old friends. Our cause is righteous, and I have no doubt of final success. But I see our generation, and perhaps our whole land, drowned in blood.
I second that emotion, baby. Be smart. We know what happens. We're going to learn from history and do it right this time. Blows must decide. Edward Herman. Everybody know who that is?
Spring
Head vampire.
1774. News
Oh,
of the
boy.
Boston Tea Party has outraged Parliament. The dumping of British tea into Boston Harbor is seen as an unforgivable provocation.
As far as the British government was concerned, what they had seen happen was a total defiance of the authority of the British state, not in some frontier backwoods area, but a total defiance of the authority of the British state in Boston.
Human.
How could they deal with that? They could either have let things be, and there were some people who said that may be the way to do it. You know, the Americans are wrong, let it be. That's what I would have advised them to do.
In an angry mood, Parliament passes a series of acts designed to restore royal authority in Boston.
India Company.
They install a military governor, General Thomas Gage, and send 2,000 soldiers to back him up. They close the port of Boston. Parliament calls these the coercive acts. The Americans call them the intolerable acts.
If you could close the port of Boston, you could close the port of New York or Philadelphia. If you could undo the Massachusetts Charter, you could undo any of the charters. Any of the colonists could have their rights taken away. This was simply intolerable as far as the Americans concerned, that these coercive acts could apply to them as easily as they had applied to Massachusetts.
Up and down the continent, delegates are chosen for what will become known as the First Continental Congress.
In many ways, the First Continental Congress is a delayed reaction.
Imagine that.
What do you do when you have to respond to something and you don't know how to respond? You call a committee meeting.
Yeah. That's simple.
John Dickinson of Philadelphia
Crazy.
is in the forefront of the growing protest movement.
I'd be very sorry if we did anything which would justly displease our sovereign. But if your neighbor's house is burning, you wouldn't just fold your hands and watch. Let the colonies unite with one spirit in one cause.
He started out good, and then he started getting a little, like, I think, scared to be disconnected from Britain and the king. You know, that protection. You can kind of see it.
In August of 1774, John Adams leaves Boston for Philadelphia.
Pitbull, absolute pitbull.
He is to be a Massachusetts
Brilliant man.
delegate to the First Continental Congress.
Here's to you, John.
At age 39, Adams has never traveled more than 100 miles from the town where he was born.
Your mileage may vary.
On the narrow dirt paths of the day, the trip to Philadelphia takes at least 2 weeks.
They
For
all
this
had nice
country
rings.
lawyer, it's a big adventure, and
Except
he notes
George, he
all the
didn't like
stops
wearing
along
them.
the way
That was
in his
his hair.
diary.
With all its money, there is very little good breeding in New York.
Here we go.
Nobody has any manners here. They all talk very fast, very loud, and all together without paying the least attention to one another. If they ask you a question, before you can get 3 words out, they interrupt and go on talking again.
The son of a Braintree farmer, Adams has always resented the rigid system of class and privilege of the day.
Here's where your differences are.
The first of his family to go to college, he came face to face with this social reality at Harvard.
Harvard students were ranked by their social
you go,
standing,
Jack.
not by their grades.
There you go.
And Jonathan Sewell, for instance, though he was not a very good student, was
Hello,
ranked
Carol.
higher than a John Adams would be because he came from a distinguished family in
Smart lady.
Massachusetts.
Adams resented claims of kin and family and blood. He wanted an aristocracy of talent, of merit. And he certainly came into this society with a kind of chip on his shoulder.
It's very
In
important.
1775,
Very
1776, Adams was in the vanguard of the revolutionary movement and full of the future of America. He saw the whole thing in providential terms as a movement that would transform history. And when the revolution broke out, he knew he was going to be at the center of it.
What's about to happen is almost too big for my grasp. We don't have men fit for these times. We lack education,
experience in the world, money, everything.
Sounds familiar.
I feel an unutterable anxiety. God grant us wisdom and strength in the coming months.
Mm.
For Adams,
God's ears,
what
honey.
happens in Philadelphia will be crucial. He must convince the other colonies to back Massachusetts with deeds as well as words.
A difficult.
Without their active support, his colony will be left to face England's military might alone.
Can you imagine? This is a big deal.
On
Accidentally
September
got together.
5th, 1774,
Crazy.
56 delegates to the First Continental Congress gather at Carpenter's Hall. They are the leaders of the colonies, the political bosses, the merchants, the wealthy landowners.
And they don't know each other. They've heard of each
From
other.
Virginia come lawyer Patrick Henry
They don't know each other.
and planter George Washington.
Planter.
From Massachusetts, political activist and former brewer Samuel Adams,
That's my
John
guy.
Adams' cousin. And merchant John Hancock, one of the richest men in America.
They
The
kind of
initial
drug him along.
confrontation of these people was like seeing foreigners. They spoke the same language or a reasonable facsimile of the same language, but they were very different people. There was no sense, I think, of unity against the British as yet. I think they saw themselves as Englishmen, and for the most part, people from Massachusetts and people from Virginia were more in touch with people in London than they were with each other.
It is not in any way certain how the other colonies will respond to the British occupation of Boston. There is the strong suspicion among some of the delegates that the leaders of Massachusetts are hotheads and troublemakers.
I am discovering that this continent is a vast, unwieldy machine. We are 13 colonies, strangers,
So important.
largely unacquainted with each other, now rushing together in one great mass. It's not surprising that we are jealous of each other's designs, fearful, timid, skittish.
The Congress debates for 2 months. The delegates agree to fully support Massachusetts. They also pass a resolution that the colonies should arm and prepare to defend themselves, if necessary, against any future British aggression. They send a petition to the king, affirming their loyalty and asking for the end of military rule in Boston.
First step.
What happens in 1774 is the 13 clocks suddenly begin to strike as one. That's what John Adams said. That's the most important fact of the First Continental Congress. Up to 1774, you have 13 different movements, very different, independent, but we won't even call them independence movements, we'll call them protest movements to British authority. But in 1774, 13 different countries, that's the way they thought of themselves, suddenly come together and begin to speak, or attempt to speak, with one voice.
Before parting for what they believe will be the last time, the delegates gather at the city tavern for a final dinner and a toast of loyalty to England.
To His Majesty, King George, may the sword of the parent never be stained by the blood of his children.
London, February 1775. Parliament has just received word of Congress's resolution that Americans should arm themselves.
Here we go.
They do not see this as a gesture of loyalty. A report is sent to King George.
If the rabble in Boston is committed to open rebellion, then the king's honor and the safety of the empire require that force be met with force. They are a disorganized mob which cannot present a very great opposition to our regular troops. Perhaps it is better to bring on a small conflict now rather than later, when a rebellious spirit has had a chance to ripen. Proper. Very proper.
The Continental Congress was regarded as an illegitimate body, a body that should not be negotiated with. There is a bitterness in Britain, a bitterness about being, in their eyes, let down. And again, we've got to remember, we're talking about 1775, 12 years before As far as the British were concerned, they'd been at war with France. A war which, as far as they were concerned, and they were right, is a war that had developed because of North America. There is this great sense that they are being betrayed. There is they don't think they're taking part in some abstract constitutional debate. They see this as a crucial betrayal. They see this as a rebellion within the family. Indeed, an interesting point there. A lot of the British literature about the war is of a son who is rebelling against his father.
That's so true.
Parliament
so true.
is running out of patience. They send another 1,000 soldiers to Boston, along with 3 new generals,
Here we go.
Burgoyne, Clinton, and Howe.
Yep.
Throughout the colonies, people are preparing to defend themselves.
We're starting
Since
to
the
prep.
founding of the colonies,
Getting tight.
each province has had a militia to deal with local emergencies. Leaders of the protest now gain control of these militia and seize stores of guns and ammunition.
So now the Sons of Liberty and
Nicholas
those around them.
Cresswell, an English traveler, finds himself inconvenienced by the turmoil.
This guy's so
the people
funny.
here are ripe for revolt. I hear nothing but oaths against England and her friends. The king is cursed in public. Everywhere the talk is of raising men and of war. Oh. At dinner, I had a long argument with Mr. Jackson about the cause of all these troubles. I got the better of him, but I now realize he was simply trying to draw out my opinions.
Uh-oh.
Now they all suspect me of being what they call a Tory spy. They watch my every move, and I'm threatened with tar and feathers and the devil knows what else. To add to my troubles, I have found that moths have eaten large holes in 2 of my suits.
Can you imagine?
I have a violent pain. I must take a dose of salts. I vow never to talk politics again until I leave these cursed provinces.
In Massachusetts, where General Gage's troops still occupy Boston, the citizens are becoming increasingly defiant.
The Americans reacted stronger and stronger. It was a step of degree by degree. They would yell at the British on the street. They would walk up to the British at night in the taverns and give them their opinion of what they thought. It was getting worse and worse.
It's getting ready to boil
And the
over.
British reacted. The British government told Gage, go out and show these local farmers what it's all about. The king's troops enforce the king's law. Get out there beyond Boston and show them what it's like.
April 19th, 1775. General Gage decides to send 700 soldiers into the countryside to capture a cache of arms. It is to be a minor operation. Their destination? Concord. A Boston silversmith, Paul Revere, and others hear of it and spread the word to the surrounding communities. On Lexington Green, the rebel militia under Captain Parker turns out to meet the British troops.
Okay, I wanted to stop it there because here's the deal. What did he just say? We're at Lexington, right? So we're used to hearing Lexington and Concord. I would say it's probably, correct me if I'm wrong, if you live out there and you know the logistics on it, but I believe it's about 16 miles apart. And there's a bridge you had to go over to get into it, and that was the beginning. Okay. The reason I tapped the brakes on this, because this is it. This is it. This is the night, where Paul Revere and Sybil and Dawes and hey, Vixen, well, good to have you in, babe. And Dawes and all the, at least like 40, 45 other people went out. But what is absolutely true is that Paul Revere was a part of that whole signaling of 1 if by land, 2 if by sea, the old North Church, right? And he didn't do it. The message was for him. So he could go and say, okay, they're coming in this way or they're coming in that way. And then he took off everybody else, all different directions. And they're doing this quietly because, listen, you've got a lot of different sentries out there now. You've got pickets. You've got all these different British soldiers. You don't know where they are. You're trying to keep everything down. Not only that, It's so easy to forget that your neighbor could be your enemy. They're living under this whole who's who, and it's really starting to boil over, and that tension is building. And I think this is a really good learning thing, because who isn't going through stuff with families or whatever right now, one way or the other, right? So these people they can't just run down the street and start screaming and yelling the British are coming. They are British. They didn't yell that. It was the regulators are coming, the red lobsterbacks, or, red coats, whatever. But they didn't say British, because a lot of these people were British, and they've still felt that way. And it was very strange, because that Band-Aid is being pulled off slow, you know what I mean? And there's a lot of these things that you keep bumping into. It's like, wait a minute, those growing pains in this, it pulling away from that system that you're used to, and finding new ways to accomplish the same things, just trying to survive. Again, parallels, right? So what I wanted to do, I didn't want them to skip over all that, because there's so much fun stuff stuck around. Paul Revere, he's one of my favorites. And, character-wise, and the things that he did and everything else, but he gets a kind of a bum rap. So the truth is, the facts are facts, just like, John says, they're funny things. And the facts are that he had a lot of help. We know a 16-year-old girl, Sybil Ludwig, she helped, and Dawes and many others, like we said. But he also got stopped, and so did Dawes, about halfway through. And they did get to continue on, but they were kind of held back from continuing on the ride. That's pretty much the gist of it. They weren't held prisoner. They weren't beaten. They weren't tortured. All these different stories you hear. He wasn't rescued by Samuel Adams and continued on the ride, like you see in Sons of Liberty. What are you doing? What really happened is what really happened. And they were able to get it out. But every time they knocked on the door, that person went to, a friend that was militia that he knew. They gathered up, and this continued on. It didn't stop. They kept going out, and bigger and more farms, and, covering more territory, because these people were still coming in from the fields with their guns and their rifles ready to fight, which had never happened before. By the time Lexington was over and Concord fight had begun. And that's what won Concord, because they kept on that ride. So to skip over that, not even mention it, could the word have got out? Sure. Why was Paul Revere so focused on it? Because somebody wrote a poem about it. Henry Wadsworth Longfellow got inspired and took it and ran with it, just like whoever it was that did Sons of Liberty. And some of these other historical documentaries or biographies, you know what I'm saying? It's crazy. So we couldn't just skip over it. So I got this for you guys to try to make up for it, because I was like, why did they just skip right over? Hope you'll like it. I think, let's see if I've got it in the right, because it's so pretty. I wanted you to see it, at least a little bit.
Welcome to the Old North Church, one of the most historic places in America, one of the places where the American Revolution began. Hello, my name is William Dawes. You may not have heard of me before, but I was one of the folks who rode along with Paul Revere to alarm the countryside on the first night of our revolution, April 18th of 75. But there were other men involved. A man named Robert Newman, for instance, who was the sexton of the Old North Church. One if by land, two if by sea. Ever heard of that before? Well, Robert Newman was the man who made that happen with these two lanterns upstairs in the high steeple of this church. Let's go see it right now. Paul Revere had made a prior arrangement with Robert Newman to hang lanterns in the tower of the Old North Church if the British invaded the countryside. Newman had to escape his home, where there were British soldiers in the downstairs area, in order to do it. But on the night in question, he was climbing the stairs into the tall steeple, lanterns in hand. We're only 2 stories up of 14. We've got a long way to go. This is the bell-ringing chamber. Paul Revere was a bell ringer here as a young boy, and that's how he became acquainted with the excellent view of the countryside from the tall steeple. Come on, we still got a ways to go. And here we are at last. You know, this would have been a lot more difficult at night for Robert Newman. But here we are, in the steeple of the Old North Church, with a panoramic view of Boston all around. If you look off in that direction, you can see the masts of the USS Constitution. That's Charlestown. That's where they were looking for the lanterns in 1775. These are the windows from which Robert Newman would have hung his 2 lanterns on the night of April 18th of 1775. They were only up for a few minutes, but that was long enough. The message got through to Charlestown that the American Revolution had begun.
Isn't that fantastic? Isn't that a beautiful church? I don't know if you ever got a chance to see it or even know what they're talking about when they say the Old North Church, but it still stands today. It's absolutely beautiful. And there's all kinds of different coding and stuff in the architecture, and it's very interesting. But it's an important time. It's an important time because you heard about Newman and Dawes, and you know, I try to bring up the others that you never hear about. Because why? The ordinary, regular person who never thought that they were going to be important in their lifetime, let alone history, 300, almost 250 years later, never thought they were going to at the time they were doing it. There were people, of course, and before this is over, you'll probably be able to pick them out, that knew they were going to be part of history, that knew they had to weigh every word because it was going to be spoken for eternity in the history books forever, right? Hopefully. I don't think they had an idea that they were going to hit a time like this where they take it and twist everything and take the facts and switch them the way they want them to read so it'll fit their narrative. But that's why I'm doing this show. So they can't do it to your grandkids, and you show your grandkids, and hopefully they'll get a foundation of being able to, you know, weave through the bullshit. But there's important places like this. Oh, Ted, thank you so much, baby. Thank you. That helps so much. Thank you. I put a lot into this one. It's going to be a fun summer. I'm going to enjoy this. I have a feeling we're going to need it. I love you so much. Thank you, sweetheart. How's Connor doing? Make sure you put some on his ear, okay? Because that can get crazy. Even if you have to put a lampshade on his head. Thank you, babe. We appreciate it from the show. And hit the like if you can. And if you haven't subscribed, please do. So anyway, and how many people, put a hand up or throw me some bacon if you're watching the Liberty series with us. And I know Lynn is about up to 4 now. I've watched the whole thing twice already and going through it again. So if you're watching it with Froze, I know you're watching it. And I had some people jump in the comments last week and tell me they were watching it too. So that's the best part, because I hope you're pulling out these people, these ordinary people who did extraordinary things. And, you know, it's important. You know, you don't realize how just standing up in one moment in time can do these ripples. And we talk about that all the time, being light workers and working, you know, the hand of God moment, or being moved, whatever, you know, you think you might be back here for, you know, this great awakening time. So many people don't realize, we say that thing, you know, never doubt that a small group of devoted and dedicated individuals, I mess it up every time, but you know the thing, can change the world, because it's the only thing it ever has. And these individuals like Newman, who, if you heard correctly, had to sneak past sleeping British soldiers to get up those noisy stairs in those noisy boots, I guess, in the dark, to light those lanterns. And if he hadn't, Revere and some of the other ones would not have gotten the signal and knew where they had to go to protect the little bit of gunpowder and arms that they had. If the British had gotten that, I don't know if the whole thing would have been over, but it would have been a whole lot tougher. So there you go. What do you think, D-Rock? Pretty, I mean, that's the thing, you know, you never know. So do what you can, and maybe you'll go down in history too. Okay, so there's that one, the Old North Church. I have one more, and then we'll go back to the Liberty, because I think it's important. Okay, I think, is this it? Did we want both of these? I'm not sure. Let's see which this one is. I think this one's cool too. I think this is inside the church. This is cool.
Listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere. On the 18th of April in 75, hardly a man is now alive who remembers this famous day and year. Paul Revere was a Boston silversmith. He was kind of very involved with the Sons of Liberty pretty early on. This growing movement, this patriot movement, started in the early 1760s. It started with a man named Samuel Adams, who was a troublemaker and a very, very strong believer in this idea, this crazy idea, that one day all the colonies should be independent and self-governing. General Gage was attempting to disarm the Sons of Liberty. There are a number of powder houses in towns, outlying towns of Boston. General Gage wanted to seize the munitions, and he heard that there was an enormous supply of munitions in Concord, and that is the case. So basically, the surprise attack was meant to disarm the Sons of Liberty so that they would not be able to defend themselves in the event of any kind of combat. So the Redcoats are marching on foot, and their purpose is to seize the munitions. When Revere heard that the Redcoats were moving on that night, he asked Robert Newman to hang these two lanterns as a signal to a group of backup militia in Charlestown, who had been waiting and watching with a spyglass every night for about the last week or so. When they finally saw the two lanterns, they knew it was time to ride, and they headed up north and spread the alarm all the way up to New Hampshire. There were two men who left Boston that night. William Dawes was the name of the other fellow. There were also several militiamen alerted in towns as these riders made their way to Lexington, and those towns alerted towns further out. So it was a town-to-town relay alarm system set in motion by these two men. Each one of those riders was risking arrest and hanging for doing what they did. Now, this signal had everything to do with timing. The Redcoats were planning a surprise attack. The Lexington alarm ride spoiled that surprise attack by having our riders get out there first and alert all the towns. So instead of walking into a sleeping village, the Redcoats actually were walking into villages with Minutemen armed and ready to do battle.
That important.
This was the case on Lexington Green and the case when they reached Concord. Now, this is two lanterns, meaning the Redcoats were traveling, as it says in the poem, by sea. But it's not actually the sea. They're actually crossing the Charles River on boats to Lexington. If they were going by land, they would have to leave Boston Peninsula by heading all the way south through what's called Boston Neck and swinging around west and heading up north to Lexington. That march would have taken about 3 hours longer. So this is the whole point of that lantern signal and why Longfellow used it in his poem, one if by land, two if by sea. Paul Revere was not anywhere near as famous in his own time as he is now today, because every classroom knows the name Paul Revere, and some of them don't know the name William Dawes. Had Longfellow written, "Listen, my children, and take a pause to hear the story of William Dawes," then perhaps we'd be talking about a different personality.
Love that. How about that? Isn't that special? I just love stuff like that. It's like, what? It's such common sense, which is another phrase you're going to hear tonight. And something else we need a lot more of, if you ask my opinion. You know what I mean? Don't you feel that way? It's like, what happened to common sense? It's not so common. Where did that come from? Why do we say that? You'll meet the fellow who's the reason that we say that. And he was another wordsmith that was wonderful with stirring emotion and getting this wild, chaotic group of people just waking up to all these, yeah, I feel that way too, you know. And then you talk to the guy, you know, the guy at the pub overhears you and he gets all mad or whatever and says something going out the door. And you know now that your neighbor doesn't feel like you, and maybe it's not so safe to say those things out loud. And you've got soldiers, and did he just leave and go right to a British soldier and say, hey, they're in there talking bad about the king? These were the times that tried men's souls. Right? There you go. All right, so I got one more fun one because Ted, do we have let me see if I can do that. This might do it. I might do it, Ted. That's a lot of buttons. Do we have any music for this feature or any kind of drum roll or... Boy, I hope that loads. That would be cool if it loads. Steady. I know. Steady as she goes, babe. We're hanging in there. It's bugging me because I got one more up there that says Midnight Ride, and I can't remember what it is. So I thought we'd take a pause, and it's time for... Wait a minute, let me get it back. Shooting sugar. It's all right. We still got it. What are ye eating? Apple cider vinegar. Wow. Okay. So what are you eating? We've already gone through the wonderful cuisine of colonial America, of course, Indian corn, wild game. And it also depended on where you were too, because Georgia's going to have it different than New England. I mean, let's be realistic. Florida, or, we weren't even down that far, but the Carolinas are going to be different than, so more oysters and shellfish and things like that. And lobster was real big, of course, in Maine, just like it is now, and seasonal as well. And here's, again, the many things that happened in these tiny little homes that people had. And now you got two people living in McMansions that cost $5 million. I don't get it. Hey, Kat, welcome in. But think about it. Everybody's in the room. Everybody's got a job. She's over there. Sister's over there spinning stuff. You got Aunt Patty over here making a fire. You got, I think, is that grandma out on the back porch turning butter? I'm not sure. Here she is making a pie. And I don't know who this is whittling over here. And then two kids. I hope dad's out hunting because or garden something, whatever. But welcome in. But everybody had something to do. And that's what it took to make a meal. So it was the meal prep as well. Because, of course, you know, in some cities, you could go and buy things and, pick up a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit of supplies that were coming over in Britain. But these people are about ready to get into a boycott. You know what I mean? I mean, a boycott to end all boycotts. No more supplies from coming across the water. So things are about to get tight. And they're already having to go through so much now to make a meal, right? So... Yep, we did roots a la creme. We did the beef olives, which I thought was gross at first, but doesn't sound so bad. It's basically just stuffed meat. What are you stuffing it with? That's the question. We had the pistachio creams, which I think would be about $50 a glass at these prices today. But there's, what do I know? What do I say? Pepper cake. That's what I wanted to get to. It's so cute because they had a lot of poems about it too. A little bit of pepper cake, a little bit of cheese. There you go, Ted. A little drink of water and a penny, if you please. So they had all these little, of course, poems and jump rope or spin the wheel or whatever it was they did back then. But there was different types of pepper cake. And I found this interesting. When they say pepper cake here, this pepper is really a Jamaican pepper that's coming from the islands, a big trade at that point in time. And it had... much more ability to preserve food. It had its own, that herbal extra that actually helped kill bacteria. So it would help preserve it. So it was very much like a spicy, clovey, molasses kind of fruit cake. And sometimes it would have fruit in it. A cheese wheel. I wouldn't mind some cheese right now. Maybe a little Swiss, maybe a little Vermont white cheddar just to, Harold and New England we're talking about tonight. But anyway, your regular stuff, your plain, flour, of course, you got to grow the wheat to make this flour. It's not easy. The butter, you're churning that. You saw grandma on the porch. You got dark brown sugar, molasses, ground cloves, bicarbonate of soda, so baking soda, and black treacle. I believe that is the black pepper from the Jamaican black pepper. And then you got eggs and milk, and you have to have the chickens and feed the chickens and milk the cow just to make this bread. But from what I understand, this bread would last like 3 months. So that's crazy, right? It's all about preserving food, and it would work today too. But today, if you were going to use pepper, you would have to use a very good, strong organic peppercorn, and then probably grind it yourself would be the best, freshest way to go about it, because it probably would help preserve food. And there's other things you can do too, which is why in the medieval times and in these times as well, did the fruitcake, because the alcohol preserved all this food longer so they have something else to eat in the winter. So that's basically what it's all about. But if things ever got tight and you were trying to preserve what you had, these recipes still work. So there you go. Another parallel for today. I know people that still use them. I know people that still eat this stuff. It is called scrapple. My mother loved this stuff. This is a big Philly item. This is still today, people eat this. Basically, this is the nastiest stuff. This is all the leftover stuff on the pig. Hey, Yoda girl. And the pork scraps, and it's a mush. And they fry it all together, and the trimmings combined with cornmeal, wheat flour, buckwheat flour, and spices. And they fry it up, and it's a real greasy treat. It's very much like a sausage, but the things they use then were hooves and the heads and the whole shabale, you know. So scrapple, scrap, is what I used to call it when I was a kid, still do. No, thank you. So this was kind of cool. The chocolate I found interesting because this was a real treat. Chocolate has its own story, and I certainly can't do it all tonight, but it's a very interesting story, believe it or not. And it was rough, you know, starting with what they had as what they would call chocolate. Came in these big bricks, like, and they always didn't have the sugar to mix with it. And I don't know if you ever tasted chocolate without sugar, or just your baking chocolate with nothing, you know, no sweet whatsoever. It's quite bitter. So they experimented a lot, and their favorite spices to mix with it, especially, you know, if they didn't have the sugar, if they had anything, you know, that was their go-to. But they also put this stuff in it. They put cinnamon, star anise, which is more of a licoricey kind of flavor, cardamom, nutmeg, and sometimes a pinch of red chili powder. Now I like that one. Orange rind, and commonly made its way into the mixture as well. So it was a real treat. And again, the story is kind of cool how chocolate, you know, comes and goes and how they get to work with it and everything. But luckily, yeah, we got plenty of time. This is good. It's working out fine. So let's get rid of that. So that's what ye are eating. I don't know how to say thou, though. All right. One more button. Nope, that's the wrong button. Uh-oh. No harm done. No harm done. We're good. Nope. Wait a minute. Wrong button. What happened there? That was me. I'll take credit for that one. Okay, here we go. This I thought was kind of fun. So let's see what we got here. This is what they have to go through. How about that? Isn't that wild? So each one of these things, each one of these tasks, from just cooking, you know, just breakfast, say, What did you have to go through to get all that? And that's the whole thing. I think we had so much to do during the day just to keep the roof over their head and to eat, and still have, you know, the time that they were teaching their kids and they're out in the field. There's so much. And I think what happens too is, you know, once everything became easier, people had more time on their hands, and they started like maybe filling those gaps with some of the wrong things, you know. But the people were no different. I heard a story today of a guy that's coming up here, and it sounds like you're talking about the jerk down at the office. You know, what he did to his wife and how he tried to lie about things he had done wrong and tried to get out of it and all these other things. They're just like us. I think they just had a way of hiding it better and kept up the facade. But I think some people believed in that facade so much that they were actually like that. Not everybody was a jerk, you know, throughout time. Some people actually lived like, you know, the 50s nuclear family, you know, after the war and that time, that little peaceful time in there when we had time to come home, put on a sweater and, you know, our slippers and smoke a pipe and read the newspaper. And, you know, somebody was in the kitchen and the kids were at the table and their homework was done. And their biggest problem was, you know, who was asking them to the prom, or, you know, I don't know, new penny loafers. I don't know. Of course, I'm talking about all those shows back in the 50s, like Donna Reed and Father Knows Best and My Three Sons and Your Three Sons and Brady Bunch. You know what I mean? Compare those to a reality show today and tell me we have, you know what I mean? So what changed? The line kept moving. The acceptable line of that meter, it just went. You know what I mean? And it was happening then too, 248 years ago. So there you go. Interesting stuff. We did Paul Revere. We did, you know, I thought that needed a little extra time to be said. Let's finish up the rest of the way. Oop, that's not it. Doggone it.
Officers came up and went forward to Parker, and they said, "Disperse, ye rebels." Parker looked at his measly lineup of men versus this royal line with bayonets that were facing him. He turned to his troops and said, "Disperse." And they turned and started to disperse and walk away. And then someone fired the shot.
No one to this day knows who fired the first shot at Lexington, but perhaps a farmer tripped over his musket in retreating. Clearly, the colonials were giving ground. A gun went off, and then the British troops began firing. Their officers lost control of them.
Some of the British line fired, the Americans fired back, men dropped on both sides, and the battle had begun. The Americans ran, the British advanced with the bayonet, and the battle was all over.
No one had given orders for the attack. No one had given orders for the reply. But on this day, on Lexington Green, a political argument among members of the same family has become a blood feud.
Shot heard round the world.
The British continue on to Concord to complete their work of capturing the store of munitions. By this time, word is out. The British are coming. The colonists swarm in around them. For the first time, the British are faced with a problem central to the entire revolution. How to subdue not just another army, but a population in rebellion.
Even the women had rifles.
This is wild.
The enthusiastic zeal with which those people have behaved must convince every reasonable man what a difficult and unpleasant task we have before us. Arms will never enforce obedience, and only God in his infinite mercy can restore peace to this country again.
That's a soldier spirit there, honey.
269 British soldiers are killed or wounded. The remains of their forces limp back to Boston.
Lexington Concord need not, I suppose, have been as major event as it was, but it came to be that. At the time, everyone understood that it was a major change.
Well, it initiated the revolution. There was no turning back from that moment on, it seemed.
No
Once
turning
you
back.
had bloodshed, and the thing
There
just
you go.
started escalating. The suspicion, the anger, it couldn't be stopped, it seemed. Although there were efforts made, of course, still.
Throughout the colonies,
First blood.
news of Lexington and Concord spreads like wildfire. From all over New England, volunteers assemble. They march towards Boston and build camps across the river from the city.
How about that? Volunteered.
At Mount Vernon, George Washington writes to a close friend in England.
The brother's sword has been sheathed in the brother's breast. We now have a sad choice. Either we are to live as slaves, or the once happy plains of America are to be drenched in blood.
Point of no
In
return.
May 1775, a second Continental Congress meets in emergency session.
Here we go.
The delegates that come to Philadelphia again are in a state of agitation and anxiety. It's much different than a year ago. For them, a die is being cast and the game is getting much more dangerous than anyone ever anticipated.
It is becoming clear that England will not back
Seatbelt time,
down.
people.
Congress decides that it must form a national army. It adopts the ragtag collection of volunteers camped around Boston. The choice of a general to lead this new army is crucial. John Hancock, as one of the wealthiest men in the colonies, feels he is the obvious choice. He is pleased when his fellow New Englander, John Adams, rises to nominate a candidate.
He
I
thinks he's
told
going
them
to get
that
it.
I had but one gentleman in mind.
He doesn't.
Someone whose skill and experience, whose independent fortune, great talents, and excellent character would win the approval of all of America and unite the colonies better than any other person in the Union. As I spoke, I watched Hancock's face as he listened to me with visible pleasure. When I announced that this gentleman was from Virginia, his expression suddenly changed from pleasure to mortification and resentment. His mood was not helped when Samuel Adams seconded the motion.
They love to throw their egos at each
John
other.
Adams would tell you that he made George Washington. But John Adams would tell you he made the revolution as well.
He would.
John Adams,
would.
very adroitly, knowing that it was necessary to bring Virginia enthusiastically into the war, stood up and proposed a Virginian to command this New England army on Cambridge Common. And of course, everyone knew who that was. It was George Washington, who was conveniently enough standing there wearing his Virginia colonel's uniform, almost as a billboard of his availability.
What a surprise. Here I am. Hey,
George
I'm dressed for
Washington
it.
certainly
I
looks
love
the
it.
part.
Chutzpah.
At 6'3", he towers over the other delegates.
Chutzpah. The man had it.
Unfortunately,
Don't care
his
anybody.
record as an officer leaves much to be desired.
Certainly, he had served in the military. His defeated Fort Necessity began the French and Indian War for all practical purposes. He was there at Braddock's defeat, 1755. I mean, it wasn't, he'd never commanded a successful operation of a major scale. He had military experience, yes, but it's a measure of how little successful large-scale military experience the Americans had, at least in terms of command, that he looked relatively qualified for this position.
One way to reinforce this idea that this was a respectable revolution for constitutional rights, not for leveling society, was to appoint one of the wealthiest men in all the colonies to command the army. And moreover, a man who had wonderful family credentials. The New York delegation was instructed not to vote for anyone who did not have what was considered to be a felicitous family background.
New York didn't
And this
vote for
was
anybody.
important because the idea was a man who was thoroughly familial, domestic, rooted, would never be a Caesar.
So true.
Before setting out for Cambridge to take command of the army, the 43-year-old Washington sends a letter to his wife, Martha, at home in Mount Vernon.
I'll be
Dearest
right home.
Patsy, I am embarked on a wide ocean from which no safe harbor is to be found. As life is always uncertain, and common prudence dictates to every man the necessity of settling his temporal concerns, and, while the mind is calm and undisturbed, I have gotten Colonel Pendleton to draft a will, which I now enclose. The provision made for you in case of my death will, I hope, be agreeable. P.S. You will be happy to know that I've bought 2 suits of what I am told is the finest cloth. I am sure you will be pleased to hear that I paid 50 shillings a suit, which comes out to only 20 shillings a yard.
I had to stop it there because I got to tell you this. This is what George and Martha had. He's talking to his wife here. These are personal letters that they're reading, which is great because you get to see the people. And when you see the people and it strikes a familiarity in yourself, like you see yourself in a piece of it, you know, a sentence, a feeling, an emotion, right? A thought, a hope, a dream. It makes it a lot closer. Not that far, not 248 years anymore. It's like these people were still, of course, they did things differently and they saw things differently and were trying to get out of their own mistakes and things that they inherited, like slavery and how to do business and how to fight. You know, even inheriting a terrible way to go about a war. You know, they're still feeling their way. All this is so new. And to try to agree to have these egos bouncing around inside Independence Hall, you know, in Philadelphia, only the second time that they ever gathered and stayed. That's why it's the First Continental Congress, the first meeting, and the second meeting. Actually 3. There was the first meeting, and that was held under the big elm tree there in the courtyard, which was there for many, many years. It was gone, I think, in the early 1900s or something. But it was just this old witness tree, you know. But that's where they gathered. That's how accidental all this was. You know, they first got together and said, hey, guys, shouldn't we get like, you know, people that from each colony to come and talk and tell us what they want? You know, we got to get everybody in on this because, you know, there's no way that Rhode Island can whip, you know, Britain by itself. There's no way, you know, that's going to happen. We have to get together here. And it got kind of scary. And like I said, you know, the farmer out in the outskirts, you know, the family that's just trying to make it is going to feel much different than you know, the businessman or the lawyer or the, you know, the huge landowner, the planter, the, you know, farmer, cattle rancher, whatever in the city. So to get everybody together was insane. And with very little communication, and all of it was done through pamphlets. And you've heard about, you know, Poor Richard's Almanac, where Ben Franklin started very early putting these kind of things out too. But he was more, you know, into the inventing and the discovery and the travel and discovering different things and telling stories and going to London and France and Spain and seeing all those things. And in the beginning of this, of course, you saw him say, I like it out here. It's very free. You know, you go into Rhode Island and everybody's like, you can't feed your donkey on, you know, apples on Sunday. I mean, they had all these crazy rules, you know, in different pockets, and they were all feeling everything out and moving out and away from the cities and trying to make their own. And you had places like Germantown right outside of Boston, Mass, where all of the poor German immigrants were. And you had these pockets all over the place in the cities in New York and Philadelphia. So to get all those people together and then to feed those wants and needs and beliefs and demands to these delegates that, you know, pick 3 or 4. This is where this started, because New York had 4 and, you know, Rhode Island, everybody had 3 or 4. Some only had 2. And they'd have to get in a carriage and they'd have to make this long trip from wherever they were to this one central place and have a meeting and then go back and tell their people all about it, and then back and forth. So insanity on the communication, insanity on the amount of time it took to give information. And it was quite the thing. So, but George and Martha had this, and in all their letters interwoven in all of their communications, they were big on socialites. They cared about how they dressed. Martha, at the end of the war, when she came to see George at the very end, she came back and forth several times. She's very profound in helping the troops and things like that. But at the end, when it was all over, she made sure everything she wore was made in America. Nothing came from Britain or anywhere else from across the seas. Everything that she was wearing when she greeted him after the war was over. She was smooth. She had class. But this is how they spoke. It was a spoken language between them, because like Lynn brought up last week, they weren't very affectionate. It was understood that they were comfortable and they were both in it for the same reasons. But they had this love of design and fashion and the new thing, the marble. And, there's actually letters where they're talking about the grain of the wood doesn't match. And as soon as he gets home, he'll take care of it. And, because he had no idea that it was going to just look so ghastly together with what they already had up. And they would have these conversations, but there was also a very deep respect for each other and admiration for each other in that way. They slept in different rooms and all that kind of thing. So I just want to let you know that, because a lot of these people have taken a lot of bad press, and they had, all these little lies and all these little quips that keep coming up and throughout that get regurgitated, started somewhere and regurgitated on, have really molded these people into something completely different. So going back to what they really were, again, I think is important in these times, because if you can get something from whatever you might be going through in your daily right now on your journey, pull some inspiration from one of these people. How are you going to do that if you don't know who they really are? You see? Does that make sense? Okay. So George and Martha, they dug fashion. They were pretty smooth characters. They cared about it. They cared about manners. They cared about what was correct, what was right. They cared about getting to know everybody. But he was no dummy. He was really given not very much to work with. And I think if you studied the battles and everything that went down and the way it went down and the brilliant way of why we're finishing this with the Culper Spy Ring, everybody working together, the ordinary common man, along with the military generals and everything in between, they all came together. And I think you're kind of seeing that now in your own life, in your own world. At least I hope you are. Okay, here we go. I'm going to get some hot water. I'll be right back.
As Congress deliberates, the first major battle of the American Revolution is about to begin. The New England militia forces have moved in to occupy Breed's Hill and Bunker Hill on the Charlestown Peninsula. Their guns now threaten the British Navy anchored in Boston Harbor.
Cat, you're in charge while I'm away.
By burning nearby Charlestown.
Keep it chilling there.
Then 2,000 British soldiers charge uphill towards the American positions. The American forces, having the advantage of height, fire down on the advancing redcoats. Line after line of British soldiers are mowed down.
The British charged up Bunker Hill really in defiance of their own military theory. As we know, their soldiers fought best on level surfaces where they could maneuver into lines 3 deep and fire and volley. They never had that opportunity when they were charging up Bunker Hill. I have a feeling had they not been opposed by provincials whom they didn't respect, they never would have attempted that charge, which resulted in such terrible carnage during their first 2 efforts to ascend the hill.
The important thing was they found out these stubborn old Yankees would fight. These stubborn old Yankees meant what they said and had the courage not only to fight that day, but to challenge the superiority and the sovereignty of the British arms. This was a major, major step, psychologically as well as militarily.
When their ammunition runs out, the Americans flee. The British finally take Bunker Hill. It is a costly victory. More than a third of their troops have been killed or wounded. The farm of John and Abigail Adams is only 9 miles from the center of the fighting. Refugees stream into the normally peaceful countryside. Abigail Adams writes to her husband in Philadelphia. This is her first taste of war.
Dearest friend, our little house is now a scene of confusion. Soldiers coming in for lodgings, exhausted refugee women and children from Boston seeking shelter. Oh, John, you cannot imagine how we're living, not knowing what the next day, the next hour will bring. Until now, I have managed to maintain a calmness, but I cannot trust myself much longer, with terrors intruding on my mind. I'm not going to ask you when you're coming back. The fate of our country depends on your wisdom. But your absence awakens in me all the love of the years we've been together. It breaks from my heart, and not knowing how to brook any restraint flows through my pen. This is but the first scene of what may be a great tragedy. May heaven spare my family and spare my most beloved friend.
As both sides are recovering from Bunker Hill, General Washington arrives in Cambridge to take command of his army.
Washington is a man of enormous, aggressive instincts. Washington would like nothing better than to go to Boston and charge, into Boston and bayonet the British and drive them out of the city. He arrives there and he finds he has no capacity to do that.
The officers are, in general, the most indifferent kind of people I ever saw. The men, I dare say, would fight well if properly led, although they're exceedingly dirty and nasty people.
He didn't find an army, he found a shanty town. Men sleeping out in the open, some of them going home for days at a time and coming back. He found a lack of powder, a lack of uniforms. Not all the men even had arms. Many of the men coming into camp would be carrying sickles and scythes, whatever they had. So Washington had an army that wasn't an army. It was a bunch of citizens together with a common cause, but certainly none of the professionalism that he really needed to begin to build it.
It was a democratical army. It was an army that elected its own officers. And popular sovereignty has many advantages, but it's probably not a military virtue, particularly when you're about to face the greatest empire on the face of the earth.
An officer must shake every man by the hand and beg and say, "Pray, brother, pray, friend, would you kindly do this or that?" When a few hearty damns to these damn people would have much better effect.
Well, Washington decided he had to impose discipline. But he had officers not worthy of the name, and so he did it himself. He was his own quartermaster. But more than that, he was doing things that lieutenants and sergeants would do in another army. He was issuing daily orders to make certain that the necessaries were emptied every week, that there was clean straw for bedding, that men did not consort with the enemy, that they in fact were the enemy and you were not to fraternize with them.
Washington is also shocked to find blacks and whites together. He is, after all, a slave owner. But he soon learns that he will need every soldier he can get.
Once the Continental Army gave the states their quotas, which the states could not meet, or perhaps manpower did not want to meet, then they began to call on, very quietly at first, call on black troops. The states declared to the slaves in the North that if they would fight, then they would be given their freedom.
God forgive me for doing so, but I ran away from my master, and I'm now enlisted in the American army. Maybe if the master had taught me to read the words of the Gospels, servants obey your master, I wouldn't have done it. I might not have heard those songs of liberty that saluted my ears and thrilled through my heart. But I'm here. I've been working horse and wagon, supplying the armies near Danbury with provisions for 4 months. I'm now serving my country faithfully.
Over 25,000 black soldiers will fight on both sides during the American Revolution. In time, a full 1/5 of the American Northern regiments will be black. It will be the most racially integrated war fought by Americans until the 20th century.
Dearest friend, you were gone only a short time, but the great distance between us makes it feel like a month since you left me. Uncertainty and expectation make my mind wander. Whatever course you can or will take, there are rocks and quicksand in every direction. Can we regain our liberty without blood being shed? I cannot think of this without horror. I wish you every public and private blessing in this most difficult time. Your little flock remembers their papa, as does your most affectionate Abigail Adams.
The real possibility of a full-scale war with England is beginning to sink in. Many people in the colonies are becoming desperate for reconciliation. John Dickinson, an early activist and one of John Adams' personal heroes, now urges Congress to send one more petition to England.
We have an excellent king. England is a generous, sensible, and humane nation to whom we can bring our complaints. Artful men may be deceiving them, making them angry at us, but I cannot believe that they are cruel or unjust. Let us behave like dutiful children who have received undeserved blows from a beloved parent. Let us complain to our parent, but let our complaints speak in a language of affection and veneration.
I about threw up here
These
a little bit.
petitions are a fruitless waste of time. What? We should be finding supplies of gunpowder instead. While we petition, the people of Boston, imprisoned within the walls of the city, suffer we know not what cruelties at the hands of His Majesty's army. John Dickinson and the gentlemen of Pennsylvania say that they are ardently with us. But as they see the break with England approaching, they start back. I see terror in their eyes.
What is the reason, Mr. Adams, that you New England men oppose our attempts at reconciliation with the British? If you don't agree with us, we are prepared to break off from you New Englanders and carry on our opposition to England in our own way.
There had been no common bond among the colonies previous to the revolutionary movement except their common tie with England. If you took that away, what would you have? Chaos. If there is no common authority capable of holding this miscellaneous collection of communities together, what will happen? Already Connecticut people and Pennsylvania people were at war in the western reaches of what is now western Pennsylvania over territorial wars. Borders were disputed. What would happen to Vermont? Was Vermont going to be part of New York? Was it going to be allowed to go separately? What was going to happen? There was one internal dispute after another that had somehow to be settled. Shouldn't we settle these first? Dickinson said, we can't agree on anything. We're in a terrible situation to try to send our ship off into the sea independently. We need Britain. We need Britain to hold ourselves together.
Dickinson drafts a petition bypassing Parliament. Addressed directly to the king, it pleads with him to intervene and settle the dispute. Known as the Olive Branch Petition, it is seen as the last hope for peace.
Attached to your majesty's person, family, and government, with all devotion that principle and affection can inspire.
Despite John Adams' objections, the petition is approved by Congress on July 5, 1775.
That we most ardently desire that the former harmony between her and these colonies may be restored.
I was walking to the State House, and I met Dickinson at Chestnut Street. We came near enough to touch elbows. I took off my hat and bowed. He passed haughtily by without moving his hat or head or hand. I suppose we'll not be on speaking terms or bowing terms
That was a lot.
for some time to come.
There was a lot back then. The other guy got cold feet, man.
It takes over a
Went all
month for the
wishy-washy.
king to receive the Olive Branch Petition.
Attached to your majesty's person, family, and government with all devotion that principle and affection can inspire, connected with Great Britain by the strongest ties that can unite societies.
At the same time, the king is receiving other news.
Yep. Here it
The
comes.
Americans have slaughtered British soldiers at Bunker Hill. They have formed a national army.
Too late.
Renegades have seized forts on the Hudson River and are preparing to attack British bases in Canada. King George is getting a double message from America.
That the former harmony between her and these colonies may be restored. Well, the die is now cast. These New England governments are in a state of rebellion. Good. I am not sorry. The lines have been drawn. Now blows must decide whether they're to be our subjects or independent.
The king declares the colonists enemies, outside of his protection. The British Navy is ordered to attack New England's seaport towns. They bombard Falmouth in what is now Maine, burning it to the ground.
To the ground.
Congress is stunned. Benjamin Franklin writes to his closest friend in England.
To William Streatham, you are a member of Parliament, one of the majority that has doomed my country to destruction. Look at the blood on your hands.
It's boiling over.
It is the blood of your family.
Boiling over.
We were
Boil,
once
boil.
good friends.
Boiling trouble.
You are now my enemy.
There it is.
Nobody in the colonies really knows what to do next.
Okay, now what?
At this moment of hesitation, a 50-page pamphlet is published which will change the course of history. Written by Thomas Paine, an obscure journalist recently arrived from England, it is called Common Sense.
Something we
It's
need.
surprising, but nothing will
Beautiful
clear
man.
up our situation so quickly, so efficiently, as an open and determined declaration for independence. Until this happens, we are like that man who puts off some unpleasant business day after day. He knows it has to be done. He hates to start doing it. He wishes it were all over, and he's haunted by the fact that he knows he has no other choice.
Exactly.
The blood of those already killed cries out for it. It is time to part.
Tom Paine was born in England in 1738. He attempted several careers, from corset maker to customs collector. He was a failure at all of them. When he came to Philadelphia in 1774, he brought with him a burning rage against the privileged classes and against the injustice of the British political system.
Paine, of course, is a political radical and a very definitely what I suppose would probably be called a loose cannon in America. The kind of
kinda
person
guy.
you're embarrassed to have on your side. Paine is a subversive.
A lot of them were.
You know, if you're a respectable slave-owning, plantation-owning gentleman, not necessarily a natural friend. Tom Paine is not the kind of man you invite to tea in Mount Vernon.
He was a common man, a laboring man, and a well-read man besides, but certainly not of the caliber of the other patriots. who were well-born, merchants, planters. He was not of that socioeconomic class, and that perhaps gave him an insight into the Republican ideals as they really should have been lived, which the other patriots didn't have. Patriots consider the people rabble. For Paine, the common people were the revolution. The simplicity
100%.
of the language and common sense made revolution something that was available to everyone and that everyone was a part of.
Paine is not only calling for independence, he is also proposing a radical new idea, that ordinary people can understand and participate in government,
Yep,
that they do not need a king.
there it is.
When planning for the future, let us remember King George, that sottish, stubborn, worthless, brutal man, the sceptred savage of Great Britain. Remember that virtue and ability are not hereditary.
It was that transformation of government that was at the kernel of the revolutionary character of the American Revolution. Paine would say that in later times. Said the independence alone would not have made much difference, but the establishment of a government in which authority was given to the people made the American Revolution an event of world significance.
We have it in our power to begin the world anew. It is the opportunity to bring forward a system of government in which the rights of all men should be preserved, that gives value to independence. O ye that love mankind, ye that dares oppose not only the tyranny but the tyrant, stand forth. America shall make a stand, not for herself alone, but for the world.
For the world, baby. For the world.
Common Sense instantly becomes the greatest bestseller the country has ever known.
Isn't that beautiful? Look at that.
Parts of it are reprinted in newspapers around the country. It is read aloud after church, in taverns, and at town meetings. Officers read it to their troops.
They read it to their troops.
From meeting
to
houses in
inspire.
New England, to farms in Delaware, to the streets of Williamsburg, Virginia, ordinary people are making their voices heard.
There it is.
The tide is turning in favor of independence.
Absolutely.
Over the next months, the talk is not only about separation from king and parliament. People are beginning to imagine what form a new government might take. Abigail Adams writes to her husband.
Dearest friend, in the new laws which you will be writing, please remember the ladies. Don't put unlimited power in the hands of the husbands. Remember, all men would be tyrants if you give them a chance. If you don't pay attention to the ladies, then you cannot expect us to obey any laws in which we don't have a voice or representation.
Well, well. We were warned that our struggle with England is going to let everyone loose. Children are going to become disobedient. Students will overthrow their teachers. Negroes and Indians will become insolent to their masters. But now I see a new tribe, more numerous and powerful than all the others, is beginning to rebel.
Dearest friend, I'm sorry, but I still find it odd that while you are proclaiming peace and goodwill to men, emancipating the nation, you still insist on retaining the absolute power of husbands over their wives. Remember, John,
tell him, girl.
Arbitrary power, like everything else that's hard and brittle, is easily broken. In spite of all your wise laws, we too have it in our power to free ourselves.
Go ahead, girl. Do it.
Throughout the colonies, royal governors are under attack. They can get no support from the British Army, which is concentrated in Massachusetts. Except in Boston, power is soon largely in the hands of local patriots. In one colony after another, a new flag is flying. It has 13 stripes, but the Union Jack is still in the corner. With all that has happened, the colonists continue to see themselves as British subjects.
This flag changed so much. All those pictures
The
of
Continental
Washington with the
Congress
flag,
had been
like it looks
called as
now,
an ad hoc committee,
never
but
happened.
it has become a government, almost by accident. Its members now find themselves running a fledgling army, advising the states on setting up governments,
No ability
building
to collect
roads,
money.
and running the post office.
How are you feeding
One
this
has
army?
to understand, to begin with, that the Continental Congress is, for all practical purposes, the first government of the United States. They had to raise money to pay for the military, they had to set salaries, and gradually the Continental Congress took responsibility for a whole wide range of other issues. And
Have you
of
ever
course,
been
this
Independence
was
Hall?
the executive, the legislative,
Amazing.
the judiciary, all combined in one
Amazing.
body.
But the delegates
I have one
still
of those
cannot
chairs.
bring themselves to take
Not
the
those
final
chairs.
step.
Just like it.
Like the proverbial Mrs. Bickle, we tremble on our wedding night.
Listen to this.
But at least
great.
Mrs. Bickle realizes that there's no turning back. She musters up her spirits, commits her soul to Jesus and her body to Mr. Bickle, and leaps into bed.
John Adams, ladies and gentlemen.
In March 1776, Congress receives startling news.
Uh-oh.
The British have evacuated Boston and are regrouping for a massive invasion of New York City. General
Regrouping's not
Washington
good.
rushes to New York to set up defenses. The moment cannot be put off any longer. The time has come to make a formal declaration of independence from England. The delegates know that this is also a declaration of war.
All of them felt that their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor, as they said on the record, all those were at stake. I think they meant it. I think they thought they would probably die, and if they didn't die, that they would be disgraced in some way that made the stakes very, very high for them.
To prepare the declaration, the delegates appoint a committee, including Benjamin Franklin and John Adams. One member is a man who has not spoken one word in Congress, a shy planter and sometime architect, Thomas Jefferson. When it comes to actually writing the final document, Adams defers to Jefferson.
First reason, you are a Virginian, and a Virginian ought to appear at the head of this business. Second reason, I am obnoxious and unpopular. You are well liked.
So
Third reason, you can write 10 times better than I can.
Borrowing ideas from English philosophers, the Virginia Declaration of Rights, and the spirit of Tom Paine, Jefferson writes the first draft in a day.
I see my job as trying to bring together and harmonize a variety of different opinions. We are putting before all of mankind in words that are both
And can be picked up by hosts of people who would use it in ways that many of these revolutionary leaders never anticipated.
The War of the American Revolution was not the first war about ideas, because after all, there'd been many wars of religion, and these were essentially about ideas, about philosophies. But I think the War of Independence I think it ended as the first truly political war. It may not have begun so. It may have been about other things, about taxes or about indirect rule from London. It may have been about grievances, but it became a war about ideas. Once they declared their independence, and once they started to think about the future form that the United States would take, once they began to see America, the America that was going to be as different from the Europe that was, then it became a political war, and ended, of course, by being, I think, a completely political war. It's not, America was going to be independent, but it was going to be a new sort of organization, a new sort of state. And there'd never been that in the world before.
On July 2nd, 1776, Congress resolves that the colonies are to be independent from England. 2 days later, on July 4th, the delegates adopt the Declaration of Independence. John Adams makes a prediction to his wife.
The second day of July, 1776, ought to be commemorated by succeeding generations as the Day of Deliverance. It ought to be celebrated by pomp and parade, with shows and games, sports, bells, bonfires, and illuminations from one end of this continent to the other, from this time forward forevermore. Now you'll think that I'm getting carried away with enthusiasm, but I am not.
Not at all, John. Carry on, baby.
I am well aware of the toil, the blood, and the treasure that it will cost us to maintain this declaration. Yet through all the gloom,
Keeping it this hard.
I can see the rays of ravishing light and glory. I can see that the end is more than worth the means. Posterity will triumph in this day's business, even though we may regret it. I trust in God we shall not.
That's a good episode. Good episode. Episode 3, July 21st. Watch it. Liberty. You can watch it free on YouTube and on government, the archives.gov. Got a little treat for you before we go. I like him. I like him. I love Crispy. He's so excited about this. He barely can contain himself. He loves playing reenactment history, little ghost. Okay, so wow, what an episode. So wanted to real quick bring this little guy in. Where is that one? Well, you know what? I'll save that for next time. But I do want to bring this one in. This right here. I don't know if you ever heard of this. This is the 1776. It's a musical. And when my 8th grade class went to Washington, it was you went to Washington for 3 days. That was the big, trip. We got to go to the theater there. That old, I forget who is it, Kennedy? I think it's the Kennedy Theater, and saw this, and it was fantastic. And oddly, if you take out the music and the singing, which isn't that bad because it teaches a lot, in a fun way. But there's some faux pas in there. I mean, Franklin really didn't want a turkey. He was talking to his daughter through a letter, or not one of his daughters, maybe his daughter-in-law. I don't know. Somebody, and he wrote down that they had chose the eagle as American symbol, and he was talking about the turkeys around, how much more noble they were, and the qualities of the turkey. They're very giving and very humble, and just all these things. And somebody took it and ran with it, and now he's choosing a turkey instead of it doesn't matter. Just the little things they twist, but within this musical, there is an awful lot of knowledge on the different delegates from different colonies, what they were like. All of that is very accurate. The timing isn't, but we know that. We learned that it wasn't signed. It was actually declared on the July 2nd. It was signed on the 4th by two, John Hancock and the Secretary of the Congress, and then it went around and it was like August 4th before they got most of the signatures on there. But the signatures are important. It's also important how they came about getting there, what they took out, the 2 big paragraphs that they took out on slavery. They wanted to end it right there. And those that knew it had to be unanimous knew they would never get the South. They said, let's get independent and then let's give it another shot. And they did throughout. But to think that it took them 100 years to get to the Civil War still boggles my mind. And the things that Abigail Adams was saying there about women and all the things brought in, these things were discussed. But the fact that, again, 100 years, oddly enough, their military tactics, 100 years to change. The first aid and things like that. So it makes you wonder what took so long, and we're still struggling, women's suffragette, all of that. Look how long. But they were talking about it here, talking about it for a very long time, and good people wanted to change it. So no small feat to live in that culture and to try to change something that's so ingrained. We're still fighting over it today. All the BS, there's not equality for everybody. I mean, come on, it's still the elite and the good versus evil, and the elite, the rich over the poor, and the struggling, and the blue collar above it's still. And you wonder if we've just found times where we got together better, but here is a perfect example. In the first and the second more so, because it was the second time they got together. They got their egos a little bit more ironed out. They were, look, we really got it. This is really something. This is going down in history books, and people are sitting in those chairs differently now. They're starting to think, I'm going to go down in history voting this way. I'm going to go down, they're keeping all the minutes of these meetings. Everything's written. The things I say are going to be told. And a lot of people didn't want that. They were like, I didn't pick this, I don't want this burden on my back. And some just couldn't get enough of it and knew they had to push it through, and they had to work very hard to persuade people to their side. And, we promise you won't have to shut down your farm or your plant, whatever. And at the end, 56 signed. That's a feat among itself. And the Continental Army, what they had started with, the people themselves coming together. There's a huge difference between, say, paid mercenaries like the Hessians. And again, this is all just my opinion. If you don't agree with me, that's fine. I'm sure everybody's got a different vantage point. This just happens to be mine, what I got from this. I'm very interested to see what you got from it. But there's a difference in the paid mercenary, the soldier for hire, fighting up against, or a British soldier who's been trained in the way they've been trained, and to fight the way they've been, to fight for king and country and just all at it. But they don't have any real skin in the game other than what's on their back. They'd like to keep it. So they do what they're told. That's a different kind of soldier. These soldiers over here are learning to fight together for one cause, even though they come from a different place, a Virginia or a New England or a Rhode Island or a New York or Georgia or Carolina. And it's different. It's different because they're fighting for their soil, for their rights, for their quest to be free and the pursuit of happiness. And these guys are all supposed to represent them and come in here and put it all on paper. And it's a very good movie. Like I said, it's free. It's on Tubi. And 1776 got a lot of people you recognize. And if you can stand the singing, I like it because I kind of grew up with it. And when I was homeschooled and I introduced my sons to it, they sat through it. They got a lot out of it. And they still quote things that they learned in third grade from this. So it's delightful. It might get your mind off of things. It might, it's free. So give it a whirl. And if you can't see it, I hope this works. Let me see if I can do this right. I'll do it right so I don't mess anything up. Let's see. If they let me get away with this one, we'll be lucky, kids. Wish I had some music. Okay. Yep, I think I did it. Okay, let's see. Follow it through. You don't want you mobile. Does anybody have that? What do you think? Oh, you guys aren't seeing this, are you? My goodness, what have I done? Hold on. Stop. I'll get it. We'll get it. Hold on. I'm not giving up. I'm a winter soldier, baby. We're not giving up. Hold on. Get it just right. Okay, let's try that again. Choo-choo, son of a bitch. All right, here we go. Maybe. One more time. It'll look better anyway this way. Come on. Come on. Boop. Why am I not hearing this? That's crazy, dude. All right, we'll just play it this way then. See if this one works. All right, this one works. Golly, are you kidding? You make me fight for this mess. Right, that one works. Let's give it a whirl. Jiminy Cricket. How about that? So there it is. You can watch it. Did you put the link? I did. I dropped the link. Let me see if it's still in my clipboard. Yep, there she blows. There it is again. That's free on Tubi. It's 1776, the musical, and it'll walk you through in the most delightful way of how, again, literary license, the Liberty Bell did not ring while they were walking up there and signing it. Again, it didn't happen. That big picture where they're all standing there waiting to sign didn't happen. But it's okay because the real thing did happen. They signed it. We're going to get out of here, but I got one more, and it's about 4 minutes, and we're finishing with it because yesterday, the things that happened, the heroes that showed up, the things that we were shown, the curtain being pulled back on the obvious chicanery and who was doing it. And again, please, just some advice, 24 hours, 72 hours, wait, tap, wonder why a trained person may have hesitated. Who was in his ear? Who had the power? Who benefits? Who was in his ear? Benghazi, somebody said stand down. I mean, you can hear that from the people who survived it. Very few. Who said stand down? Were they told to stand down? Again, when there is a situation like Marilyn Monroe and they find her and we're talking about it and somebody says, I just don't believe that many people can keep a secret. Just the people in the circle. Even the one saying don't has no idea. Because somebody behind them who has the power, who benefits. Whether you're looking at JFK or the Oklahoma City or any of these things. That one will flip you upside down. That one will bake you noodle. Oklahoma City. How blatant. How blatant. Yet still, here we are. Nobody. Janet, Reno, Waco, you know the thing. So what's different this time? What did they do here? Samuel Adams put classifieds and said, please peacefully come while we take all this tea and ploop it into the harbor. Patrick Henry wrote and said why you feel the way you do and what you should do about it. You should gather, you should talk about it. You should tell everybody, find those people that feel like you do and say, what can we do? Well, we can go to the meeting. We can go to the community meeting. We can run for office. We can teach a kid. We can pull a kid aside and say, do you know about this stuff? Do you know how to read cursive? Can you read these documents? What do you think? They don't want them to know cursive. Why? Who has the power? Who's behind it? Why are they taking stuff out of history books? Why are they changing things? This was 1997. And yeah, you can pull stuff out and not everything is exactly accurate. And we could argue forever on any individual you want to pick and what they did and why they did it and what maneuver and why it was chosen. I've been in hour arguments about things, something as small as why didn't somebody pursue? Why didn't General Washington pursue the British out of the Battle of Fort Monmouth? Right here, my backyard. Battle of Monmouth, right before Yorktown. Well, it was kind of a draw, and, they just let them go and, let the British get on ships and go up to New York and regroup and chill. Do you know the terrain? Do you know what was going on? Do you know what they had to march through? you know, the town was full of Tories. They were all British sympathizers. When the British came through, they were welcomed. They were well taken care of while they waited for those ships to come and carry them out. George Washington knew that. He would have lost the rest of his army because they would have had help. It was like they walked into reinforcements. So he said, let me back up. Let me go ahead and flank them. Get with the rest of my army and we'll chill. You know, have a little something to eat, make a sandwich, get strong. We'll go at it again because we can't stop them. They didn't have a navy at that point. They had hired privateers, pirates. So there's that, you know, and we weren't there. All we can do is, you know, there's experts at this that can't. But it's so easy to remember, you know, to bank on the stuff that we've been told. As people in this, you know, what we're going through now and as light workers, I may look at yesterday differently than y'all. It's certainly not missed on me. The devastation of the families. I pray for them. I pray for anybody going through any of this weather, hardships and financial hardships and worry and fear and all these things. Fear not. You are witnessing history, just like they did here. The parallels are off the chain. And I hope you look at this series and pull something out of it that inspires you, something that propels you forward. Even if you're just laughing at how George and Martha had talked about fashion, just to kind of keep a little bit of that culture going. Because when he said, I'll be home soon, I'm changing my will just in case, and I hope it's satisfactory. And I'll be home soon. And he showed up 8 years later. These were real sacrifices from people. And people are sacrificing today, you know, for things that they believe in, to try to hold on to the same things that they were talking about 248 years ago. And they signed the paper and they stood, even if it was on August 4th. So let's see if I can find this. I think you'll like this. This is a good way to finish tonight. And next Sunday, we'll do the next one. Boy, if I could pull this off, right?
Protein is essential for building and repairing muscle.
I want your commercials.
It also
Hold on
provides
one
energy to your body, along.
But for any eve of the 4th of July,
I am not
I,
here.
Paul Harvey, do herewith bequeath unto you something to
Hang on, let
remember.
me check these settings.
You may not be able to quote one line from the Declaration of Independence at this moment. Henceforth,
That
you'll
is so
always be able to
weird.
quote at least one line. It's in the last paragraph.
Hold on 1 minute. I don't think it's the settings there. Don't think it's the settings there. Un momento, por favor. Doggone it. Want you to see this. Also tab audio. Maybe that's it. Hang on 1 second, guys, if you're talking to me. Did I just lose it? Doggone it. All right. Hang on. We'll pull it up again. Cancel that. Cancel that. Pulling it up again. Let me see if I can pull it up another way. Hang on. Stay with me, guys. Okay, I can hear it now. Let's see if it works. My goodness, it's giving me trouble tonight. It sounds like one of my character voices. Is that correct? Oh, might be correct.
Americans, the how and the why of our beloved republic are so much better known and understood than the who. The United States of America was born in 1776, but it was conceived 169 years before that. The earliest settlers had watered the New World with much sweat. They had built substantial holdings for themselves, for their families. And when the time came to separate themselves from a tyranny an ocean away, at best it meant starting all over again after the ravages of war. Researching what you're about to hear gave a whole new dimension to my reverence for our nation's first citizens.
Tell it, Paul.
All others of the world's revolutions, before and since, were initiated by men who had nothing to lose. Nothing to lose. Our founders had everything to lose and nothing to gain, except one thing. Hello, Americans. I'm Paul Harvey. You remember the cherry tree fiction. A long time after you have forgotten the more earth-shaking history-making episodes in the life of George Washington. You have misplaced in your memory the details of Ben Franklin's statesmanship, but you remember his flying a kite. Joyce Kilmer was a great military hero. But the only thing you personally recall about him is his poetic tribute to trees. Maybe of this current decade, that which will be remembered best will not be its wars and its moon rockets or its crumbling frontiers or the giants who lived and died. Maybe all that'll survive to linger in the day-by-day vocabulary of generations yet unborn may be the songs of a Memphis minstrel or the reincarnation of electric automobiles. But for any eve of the 4th of July, I, Paul Harvey, do herewith bequeath unto you something to remember. You may not be able to quote one line from the Declaration of Independence at this moment.
But I can.
Henceforth, you'll always be able to quote at least one line. It's in the last paragraph where you will recall when I remind you.
Yes,
It says,
every
we
time.
mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. In the Pennsylvania State House that's now called Independence Hall in Philadelphia, the best men from each of the colonies sat down together. This was a very fortunate hour in our nation's history, one of those rare occasions in the lives of men when we had greatness to spare. These were men of means, well-educated. 24 were lawyers and jurists. 9 were farmers, owners of large plantations. On June 11, a committee sat down to draw up a Declaration of Independence. We were going to tell the British fatherland no more rule by redcoats. Below the dam of ruthless foreign rule, the stream of freedom was running shallow and muddy. And we were going to light a fuse to dynamite that dam. This pact, as Burke later put it, was a partnership between the living and the dead and the yet unborn.
There it is.
There was no bigotry. There was no demagoguery in this group.
Living,
all had shared
dead,
hardships.
unborn.
Jefferson finished a draft of the document in 17 days. Congress adopted it in July, and so much is familiar history. But now, King George III had denounced all rebels in America as traitors. Punishment for treason was hanging. The names now so familiar to you from the several signatures on that Declaration of Independence, the names were kept secret for 6 months, for each knew the full meaning of that magnificent last paragraph in which his signature pledged his life, his fortune, and his sacred honor. 56 men placed their names beneath that pledge. 56 men knew when they signed that they were risking everything. They knew if they won this fight, the best they could expect would be years of hardship in a struggling nation. And if they lost, they'd face a hangman's rope. But they signed the pledge.
To be free.
And here is the documented fate of that gallant 56. Carter Braxton of Virginia, wealthy planter, trader, saw his ships swept from the seas. To pay his debts, he lost his home and all of his properties and died in rags. Thomas Lynch Jr., who signed that pledge, was a third-generation rice grower, aristocrat, large plantation owner. After he signed, his health failed. His wife and he set out for France to regain his failing health. Their ship never got to France, was never heard from again. Thomas McKean of Delaware was so harassed by the enemy that he was forced to move his family 5 times in 5 months. He served in Congress without pay, his family in poverty and in hiding. Vandals looted the properties of Ellery and Clymer and Hall and Gwinnett and Walton and Hayward and Rutledge and Middleton. Thomas Nelson Jr. of Virginia raised $2 million on his own signature to provision our allies, the French fleet. After the war, he personally paid back the loans, wiped out his entire estate, and he was never reimbursed by his government. In the final battle for Yorktown, he, Nelson, urged General Washington to fire on his, Nelson's, own home, which was occupied by Cornwallis. It was destroyed. Thomas Nelson Jr. had pledged his life, his fortune, and his sacred honor. The Hessians seized the home of Francis Hopkinson of New Jersey. Francis Lewis had his home and everything destroyed, his wife imprisoned. She died within a few months. Richard Stockton, who signed that declaration, was captured, mistreated, his health broken to the extent that he died at 51. His estate was pillaged. Thomas Hayward Jr. was captured when Charleston fell. John Hart was driven from his wife's bedside while she was dying. Their 13 children fled in all directions for their lives. His fields and grist mill were laid waste. For more than a year, he lived in forests and caves and returned home after the war to find his wife dead, his children gone, his properties gone, and he died a few weeks later of exhaustion and a broken heart. Lewis Morris saw his land destroyed, his family scattered. Philip Livingston died within a few months from the hardships of the war. John Hancock, history remembers best due to a quirk of fate rather than anything he stood for, that great sweeping signature attesting to his vanity, towers over the others, one of the wealthiest men in New England. And yet he stood outside Boston one terrible night of the war, and he said, "Burn Boston, though it makes John Hancock a beggar, if the public good requires it."
There it is.
So he, too, lived up to the pledge. Of the 56,
He
few
became
were
a patriot.
long to survive.
Slow.
5 were captured by the British and tortured before they died. 12 had their homes from Rhode Island to Charleston sacked, looted, occupied by the enemy, or burned. 2 lost their sons in the army. 1 had 2 sons captured. 9 of the 56 died in the war from its hardships or from its more merciful bullets. I don't know what impression you had of the men who met that summer in Philadelphia. But I think it's important that we remember this about them. They were not poor men. They were not wild-eyed pirates. These were men of means. They were rich men, most of them, and had enjoyed much ease and luxury in their personal living. Not hungry men, certainly not terrorists, not irresponsible malcontents, not fanatical incendiaries. These men were prosperous men, wealthy landowners. They were substantially secure in their prosperity. They had everything to lose. But they considered liberty, and this is as much as I shall say of it. They had learned that liberty is so much more important than security, that they pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. And they fulfilled their pledge. They paid the price, and freedom was born.
There you go. There you go, Yankee Doodle. Hell of a story. You're in one now, too. So you hang in there and watch 1776. Get some music. Dance around. You know, they're going to be dancing. You might as well have fun, too. It's delightful the way they put it together. They bring in Thomas Jefferson's wife into it. Of course, that whole thing didn't happen, but it's okay because it lets you know a little bit about John and Abigail too. Their letters back and forth, the way they do it is very cool. She's asking for pins, John, pins. We need stuff. We can't do anything. We're fighting smallpox and this and that, and the war's coming through, and gives you a very nice perspective of what it's like to be them. And if you're having a hard time being you on your journey right now as a light worker, we talk about this all the time. I'm seeing more light showing up, guys. I know it looks like it. There's a lot of darkness being reported, a lot of darkness here, and we're seeing it, and others are seeing it too. If you notice, a lot of the magic spells aren't working like they were. Did you see it? Like I said, I saw the good going through and coming out, just like tornadoes used to hit in Alabama, and everybody would just, people that didn't talk before would come and do the most amazing things for each other. This is what I'm talking about. And right now we need all light we can get. So keep the lights on. Thanks for being here. I love this summer event. I'm so glad we're doing it because I feel like it's parallel and almost through. You know, at least we're hearing things that resonate now for us as well. And if it gives you hope or it gives you thought or it makes you look at somebody different or a character from the Revolutionary War, or even how just the colonial people got through, you know, there's a lot of wisdom in there. If they got through it then without electric, if your electric is out, maybe you'll make some lard candles, right, Ted? Make some lard candles, make some pepper bread, maybe make some, if you're lucky enough to have that many pistachios around, you can make that pistachio drink, or, you know, or maybe make you some beef olives, something like that, in a big old cast iron skillet on an open fire. You know, look, if they did it, you can do it. Prepare ahead, prepare for anything, but prepare in the light. Make sure you're grounding, make sure you're listening to fun stuff. Do things like this to get your mind off of it. Read a good book. Pick one of these characters and look into them. Look into Patrick Henry. Look into Thomas Paine and Common Sense. Henry was saying that the books are available. I would read it. I have Federalist Papers, all of these things, things that Ben Franklin wrote down, George Washington's letters from Valley Forge. I'm trying to make an ending to this. And I hope Lynn will be back next Sunday. I'm not sure what her vacation was, but I told her I don't want her crazy driving trying to get here on time or anything like that. You know, it's supposed to be fun, and we can come in and talk about this back and forth as much as she wants. So, and some other guests too. But at the end, I would very much like to take you live to one of these areas around. I don't know if I'm going to go to Valley Forge, but I can more than likely get to the Battle of Monmouth. It's right at my backyard. Old Tennant Church, lots of hauntings and ghost stories there for you. Quite a few. And, you know, my journey really started with a Revolutionary War soldier. So this is real near and dear to my heart. I wish you all well. Don't believe the crazy stuff. 24 to 72 hours. And watch everything and believe in the heroes that you see. There was quite a few yesterday. Like I said, again, it doesn't take that many people to pull off something. This echoes 1963 to me in so many ways. It's not even funny. You get the same feelings off of it. So I don't know where my empaths and my people with abilities are out there, but that was, I was feeling it like it was echoing, you know, and a lot of other stuff too. But you hang in there, because we were shown an example yesterday of how to do just that. Hanging in there and be strong. Be strong in the storm, guys. I love you. Thank you so much for being here. On the way out, if you haven't hit the like, please do. Please visit the tpublic.com. Please watch episode 3 of, let me go back in here and get that. You guys dropped it. It is Liberty, episode 3, and the new one is called, again, very fortuitous, The Times That Try Men's Souls, 1776 to 1777. I'm enjoying the heck out of this. Thank you guys for being here. I think we needed this today, and I'm so glad that you're taking this ride with me. Thank you for being here. See you tomorrow night with Steve. I have no idea what we're doing, but we'll have fun either way. Thank you, mods, for being here. Thank you for all your help, Kat and Ted. Thank you so much for the super chats. Please go in video and put some comments there. I would love to hear you tell me who your favorite characters are. Have you ever heard, maybe you're in another part of the world and you really don't know much about these characters and you're kind of seeing one that you really like, or that was so different from what you really thought they were. And I'll keep pulling out my favorites and keep bringing in the recipes and the little things that I want to do a lot on the encampments, the colonial army encampments, because I'll ask you a question right now. On the way out, tell me, how many soldiers do you think slept in the small tents that they had in the encampments in Valley Forge and that they carried with them wherever they went? How many do you think were expected to be in those small tents? And I'll make sure I have a video to show you some of that too. But I'll tell you the answer on the way out at the end of this song. So I think we all could use kicking the blues a little bit tonight. So take off your shoes, kick away the blues, ground yourself, and be good humans out there. We need every single one we can get. The ordinary man, the ordinary woman. You make all the difference in the world. Don't you think different? Good night, everybody. God bless America.